Hey guys, it is Tristan with Nerdouts Newsstand, and today on Ask the Experts, I have J.H. Williams III, a man who took the comic book paneling to a whole new level, one we've rarely seen before, from Batwoman to Promethea. Your work has been beyond groundbreaking. Um, and the characters that you created, such as Kate Kane, you made her what she is today.
Oh,
So, how are you, by the way?
oh, good, good.
Good.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on here. What initially, going back, years, got
Uh-huh.
you interested in writing comic books?
Um, well, I mean, it first started off with, you know, being a comic book fan as a kid. The typical, you know, I don't know, reading whatever comics I got a hold of as a kid. But I was more focused on back then. I was more focused on the art rather than necessarily the stories. So, I would read comics all the time that didn't necessarily have a conclusion or be a part in the middle of something because I was just more focused on looking at the artwork. But as I got a little bit older, uh, I discovered a few comics growing up that kind of changed that for me to where I started looking at them as a form of story beyond just the visuals. Um, and that was Micronauts and Uncanny X-Men when I was growing up. Really hit that home for me. And then I became excited in comics as, a storytelling medium and branched out from there. So I ended up, discovering early on creators such as Mobius and of course Jack Kirby, lots of European stuff, some Japanese manga. I was discovering all that kind of stuff really early on. Um, and it kind of made me look at myself, even though I could draw, I always drew when I was young. I kind of looked at myself as like, I didn't want to be just an artist. I wanted to be able to be a storyteller. And I kind of feel like, in a lot of ways, comic book artists, even if they never get into the writing shoes that I've, managed to step into, they are storytellers. They make it a visual presentation of the story in conjunction with the text. So as I got more comfortable being a comic book artist, I started thinking about more the kinds of stories I wanted to tell. I guess I even was thinking about that before I became a professional comic book artist, that there were stories that I wanted to tell, so, and always kind of envisioned myself being able to be in the writing seat and in the drawing seat.
That I totally get it. And in looking at your newest one, what was your? I know Echolands took you a long time to get to, but
Yeah.
what kind of inspired that storytelling, especially because we see a very different dimensional. It's almost longer form storytelling with a lot of it not necessarily coming from the bubbles. It
Uh-huh.
comes from the art. A lot of the story really does. What
Yeah.
was your inspiration for that?
I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe because the concept that Echolands is, um, we wanted it to be an adventure tale. And adventure tales always are fast paced, but the best adventure tales tend to take place in worlds or scenarios that are visually vivid. And I mean, as an example, I mean, imagine if Star Wars was a comic book first.
Right.
How much of that would be, how much of the story there would be conveyed in the visuals because the world of Star Wars was so richly detailed, right? So, and a lot of the elements of the Star Wars story are in those peripheral details. And so with Echolands, we kind of like, we knew that the world was so complex that we were building that I think if we loaded it with exposition, it would really bog it down and not let the the adventure aspect have room to breathe, I guess you could say. And so we, going in with the visuals, we wanted to make sure that on every page there was things that were representing the world, the unique world that this is taking place in, and how much of the story is in that, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, and with that one, I read it and then I went back through it to kind of go back through some of the art and some of the things I may have missed in the background as compared to the foreground.
Yeah.
And there was a lot, which I usually go through pretty detailed, but when you have that level of world building, I think it's easy to miss some of the things. And I think that's what's so great about being able to go back.
Yeah, yeah. And also I kind of feel like if you're going to tell an adventure tale in a brand new world, visually, I think every opportunity on the page needs to be taken in terms of selling that reality and selling that world. And also the thing we were thinking about, it dawned on me as we were writing it, how fast we shift scenes. So when scenes shift so quick, you have to make sure from a visual standpoint that each scene has a certain level of massive information in it. You're not wasting a single panel.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because part of comics storytelling is selling the environment that the story is taking place in. And so that was super important as we were going along. There's very few panels in this book where we drop away backgrounds or anything, because it's just I always feel like with the scene shifts so quickly, I think it would make people feel a little too loose when they read it on where things are taking place and how rich the environment actually is.
And that's one thing that drew me to that book so much, is because I read from the big two, I read indies, I read anything.
Yeah.
And you don't see that anymore. You don't see the different paneling aspects that you necessarily use, even in Batwoman. You don't see that. I don't know that anyone's necessarily a bad artist. I don't mean that. Right. I just mean it's your typical formatted comic book. And this one really took a completely different direction. And if you can do world building without saying a word about the world, you can really, really sell the book. I absolutely love it. So I want to talk about your characters that you created. One specifically was had their own short-lived solo series, right? And it's not always guaranteed that these characters will last. You co-created Chase specifically at DC Comics,
right? Which
is a character that did succeed. And I just wanted to ask how it feels knowing that your character struck a chord with not only readers who enjoy her, but peers who continued to see her. We're even seeing her used throughout Infinite Frontier coming out right now.
Yeah, apparently. I wasn't aware of until just recently.
No.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. I mean, when the whole situation with Chase, getting canceled, just as we were hitting our stride, I mean, that was sort of like that was a tough blow for us, especially because at the time we were actually already working on the next arc, which was going to be a 4-parter involving the Justice League. And
that's so cool.
Yeah, and it was I think I drew 7 pages of it when we got the news that they were going to cancel the book and to stop work. It was so disappointing because a buzz was starting to happen.
Right.
But by that point we're roughly 10 issues in, and with the buzz happening a little bit late, I guess you could say, it just it didn't come in time. That buzz didn't come in time, and so it was kind of a little frustrating knowing that we were going to be canceled just as we were starting to get some attention. Me and my co-author on that, Dan Johnson, we both feel like if we had gotten that just another 4 issues to do that Justice League arc, we may have survived.
Oh yeah.
Because things were starting to take off. But what's super interesting, because of that buzz, Chase became sort of like this cult series that became more popular after it was dead. And I hear from people all the time how much they love Chase, and therefore I think other creators liked her too, and that's why she started seeing her crop up in other books. I mean, granted, there is a little bit of a formula involved in some of the production over at DC or Marvel. I believe there are copyright laws involved in that. Any character IP that they have, I think they have to have some sort of usage every 5 years.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think so. So some of her cropping up, I think the writers that are getting the chance to play with the character enjoy it, but I don't know if it's always their decision or if it's a suggestion coming from editorial because they need to hit a certain mark, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Unfortunately, that means we'll probably see some more Watchmen popping up soon or something.
Yeah.
Oh, geez. So what was it like when you worked with Chuck Dixon on the Justice League Raiders Elseworlds story? It must have been so fun drawing that project, like drawing the Justice League in that Western setting.
Yeah.
I absolutely love it.
Oh yeah, that was a super fun one. There's a lot of stuff in there that I did that I like. But there's some things now that that I wish I could have done slightly differently. But as a concept, I think it was really cool. There was a lot of people that really wanted to see a follow up to that. A sequel of some kind. And people, still remember that one, which is kind of interesting when you think about the Elseworlds titles on how many actually do get remembered. I don't think it's very many. So it's pretty cool to be among the ones that do.
Oh yeah, it's like that and maybe Vampire Batman and Injustice. Those are, or Red Sun add in there. But yeah, there's a lot of them, but those are some of the great. So before I go into my next question, I got to ask, Alan Moore, insane or intelligent?
Oh, intelligent.
I knew the answer, but he's always popping up every few years being mad at Western comics. And I'm just like, I totally get it. I get it. They did a lot of, DC did a lot of crappy things. And you should know that. But you've worked with 3 of the greatest from the British invasion era, right? So Alan Moore on Promethea, Grant Morrison, and then we had Neil Gaiman on Sandman. So many people know their differences. They're clearly different writers. Oh, yeah. Do they have any similarities that you can tell us about?
I guess the biggest similarities are just how much all of them are aware of comics history, and how much of them have a love for comics history. The other thing I would say is all 3 of them have, even though they have, they all have a rich sensibility that they share.
Yeah.
Even though that they have a diverse way of conveying it. So they're all very interested in how much can be mined out of a story. And they all look at it from a different point of view than what you would expect, I guess you could say. Right. Yeah.
What was it like working with them? Kind of some of the biggest names that came out of that era.
It's extremely gratifying. Having those opportunities was something I never expected. And even going back and when I look at the early stuff of Promethea, some of the stuff I was doing, I still don't quite know how I got that job, considering the level of talent Alan had already worked with. I think my early stuff on that could have been better. But what was great about it is I think maybe Alan could see how, just from our conversations, how much I'm willing to try anything. And so if he was willing to jump off a cliff for something, so was I. And I think that went a long way in Promethea becoming what it did. He knew that I would be up for any challenge. And so it was kind of like this cool little push and pull creative relationship about, what could be accomplished,
And then also we talked about Elseworlds just a few minutes ago. You technically kind of, in your Son of Superman Elseworld created John Kent. When it comes to how he is in the comics now, they aged him up, right? And he is pretty much your creation. Is that something that happens in comics often, I guess I would say, because even though you're not credited, you did in an Elseworld story create that character.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't really thought about that. I didn't even realize how much John Kent was being used now. There's a lot of current events stuff. I end up missing a lot of things.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting that they're using him. Maybe that's something I should talk to them about.
Yeah, he's Superman right now.
I see. They're probably viewing it as because it was an Elseworlds. They're probably viewing it as something that they don't need to say it was created by so and so because the version that they're doing is different.
Right.
Yeah, I doubt they're even crediting Howard Chaykin on that too.
And David Tischman.
Right. That's right. So, but it's interesting, that's the thing with corporate comics is it's so complex about how the IP is controlled. And so it's always a guessing game when you're working on stuff for corporate comics, how much you're going to get out of it, how much will be acknowledged. And they kind of make you go through a process too. So like if you create something for them, a new character, they don't just automatically give you equity in that character. You kind of have to ask for it. You have to go through a process.
Oh, wow.
It's kind of, I appreciate, this is going to sound a little sticky, but I appreciate that they will share equity to creators and characters that they create that exist within the DC universe. That we've gotten to that point where that happens. But what I don't like is some of the process that they make you go through to obtain that. So they don't just automatically give it to you. So if you don't ask, you're not going to get it.
That's a shame.
Yeah. And I don't understand the reasoning why they have to make it so difficult. But what's funny is, so like as an example, after the fact, I went through and made sure I filed for equity on a bunch of characters that I created or co-created. And you have to fill out this paperwork and write down the information about the character, where they first appeared, why you feel it's yours to claim. But then the thing that's really funny is that they want you to attach images of the character to this document. And I'm kind of like, what? You have like comics. So it's like this weird little hurdle that they have you go through, and I don't understand that part. That's like, it almost feels, I don't want to sound bad about it, but it feels a little like, really? Why are you making this? It's bizarre. But in some ways, I think on a logistical front, they publish so much stuff that I think they would have to probably pay a whole set of personnel to keep track of all the content that was newly created on a monthly basis of new characters, to kind of keep track of what who did what and who owns what or deserves equity in what.
Right.
So I guess possibly from a logistics point of view, putting some of the burden on the creators possibly is maybe more helpful for them to have tracking that information, I guess.
Right. I guess that makes sense. They're protecting everybody in the situation, sort of.
Yeah. I just don't know how they do. Where it gets a little sticky on a corporate mentality aspect is they just don't come forward and, your editor on whatever project you're working on, you create, villain A. They don't come forward to you and say, hey, you should file equity paperwork on this character you've created here. They don't offer that. They don't come forward with that information.
Oh my goodness.
So you have to be a little bit looking out for yourself a lot in that, and heavily think about the business side of that kind of stuff.
Oh, so, yeah, you definitely got to be proactive, because that wouldn't be fair in so many situations with characters you've created. So I have to ask, back during the Brad Meltzer Justice League of America run, he started things off with that Zero issue that had various artists doing classic era of the Trinity, and also once in the possible future. Your page was the Trinity fighting Lex, and he was shouting, "He was my son." Do you have any context to that? Did Brad ever tell you, or was it just a kind of mystery we'll never know? No. I wondered, because it's like, who was your son? Like, it'll be something that I forever think about. So when it comes to
it's okay.
When it comes to Batwoman, a lot of what's been explained to me, and I've kind of explained to people, is that when Chaykin was to be introduced during 52, it was made clear that she would be a lesbian, and the media kind of jumped on it, started to proclaim her as a lesbian superhero, as opposed to a very distinct, different description as a superhero that just happens to be a lesbian. So DC kind of quieted down, let the media die down, and then released it after the RIP and the Battle for the Cowl. Is there any truth to that? Because that's always the story I've heard.
I don't know if there was a internal decision to have a gap between that media outburst and the launch of the character. I think a lot of times, from my own experience working with corporate comics, DC in particular has a tendency to announce things before they are ready.
Right.
So I think that was a prime example. It was not done well in the fact that they put the upfront promotional detail of being lesbian, then character was kind of dumb, instead of character. Oh, and by the way, she's
exactly.
So that I thought was really dumb. So it feels a little salacious, like a kind of a cheap ploy,
right?
Tactic to draw attention. I don't know if that part was on purpose or if it was somebody just not thinking about how they were phrasing it. But yeah, I mean, the publishers, when they're excited over something, DC as an example, when they're excited over something, they tend to announce things before they're actually ready. So like, or even solicit things before they're really should be. Sandman Overture was a good example of that, where they were soliciting issues before we were ready to have them come out.
Oh my goodness.
And that's why one of the reasons why that whole 6-issue run took so long to get finished, because, we were barely into issue 1 when they were soliciting it. So it's like,
oh my gosh.
you know, and I had to explain to them, Neil, he takes the time he takes. He does it's his magic, right? That's how he does what he does.
Exactly.
But for me, they wanted, I don't know what they thought. They knew how I operated before going into it. But yet they still were compelled to solicit when I'm telling them it's not going to be ready. And they kept wanting, I don't know, I think they thought, oh, he'll magically get faster.
Oh my gosh.
And it was like, no, it's going to take me as long as it takes. I'm not going to, especially on a Neil Gaiman story, especially the way they were promoting Sandman Overture as possibly being the last Sandman story ever. There was no way I was going to try to just cram that stuff down, So
yeah.
So that was a mess.
Oh my goodness. Some of the things that DC did to you was a mess. Speaking of a mess, that's a good segue. The events that led up to you and Hayden Blackman leaving Batwoman were pretty well known. Like, you guys left because Kate and Maggie couldn't get married, and DC refused because Didio didn't think superheroes should be married. What plan are you able to talk about the plans? Didn't you actually have 25 drawn at that point, or at least started?
We had, I'm trying to think of where we were in production. I know I think we had scripts written, or at least started to be written.
Yeah.
But we did have an outline that we had gone over with editorial. There's a little bit of a misconception about the events that led to us departing. It wasn't the marriage thing became kind of the hot button focus, but it had more to do with editorial interference in general.
Wow.
Because that was just one big piece of it. But there was other things that we didn't cite in our resignation that played a part in that. There was other things that we had planned that we were already working on, and then editorials coming in and telling us we couldn't do it when we had a big plan, and everything we were writing was building up to that big plan, and no longer could we do the big plan. And so there was a few little things here and there where there was like this bizarre editorial interference at the last minute. And we don't, I guess to put it in a better way, as writers, we don't mind editorial input on things, but it becomes very difficult and stressful if you're getting that input at the last minute after you've already set things up in prior storylines leading to a particular thing. And that just becomes, it just became intolerable at that point. The marriage thing became a hot button focus for obvious reasons, because the whole situation was a little, it wasn't good. I mean, it wasn't, and the whole, it's hard to talk about it without becoming too detailed on the information.
Oh, I understand.
But the situation just wasn't good. We had certain conversations that I'll say that made us feel like, well, there's no reason why we couldn't pursue that storyline. And then we were told that we could only pursue that storyline up to a certain point. And the excuse was, none of our characters can ever get married, yada, yada, yada. But there was other things involved in some of those conversations that gave us pause. And so, that weighed on us heavily, but we were willing to kind of play the game to see where it would go. And hopefully some decisions could be changed, or we could change minds as we went along, because that's one of the things with editorial at the big two companies is that sometimes they will change their mind on something.
Right.
So that's sort of what we were doing. We're kind of writing it out to see where it would go, and hopefully be able to change their perspective over time, because the storyline we had planned was going to be a long one anyway. Before the characters were to get married, but then other circumstances came up with other editorial decisions that kind of where we were like, okay, we can't even deal with this. The horrible part was when we resigned. We actually resigned internally first, before we put a resignation letter made public. We sent it off and didn't hear from anyone.
Oh my goodness.
Which was really strange. And, a week went by and we're not getting no one's talking to us. And so we're like, well, we're just going to say, this will be our last issue for X, Y, and, for whatever reason. And then we didn't even get to finish that part.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. The crazy fun part is we actually had the next arc. So we had a shorter arc planned. And the crazy part is we were going to have Bill Sienkiewicz for a couple issues.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was all set up. I had been talking to him. He agreed to do it. and then I had to give him the phone call and say,
oh, no. That's such a shame. Dang, DC messes. I mean, don't get me wrong. It seems like they need editorial staff more now than ever because everything's a mess. But they've messed up a lot of really good runs. Nobody would have. Chaykin would not have the popularity that she has right now without you two. There's no way possible.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for saying that. Hayden and I would love to believe that's true, but you never know. I don't like to necessarily say, oh yeah, we're the guys responsible for how popular something is.
Right, I understand. So humble. Did you ever end up reading like the continuation from Mark and Draco, or see how the loose threads were kind of tied up?
No, not really. I heard from various fans in the readership that would talk about it here and there.
Right.
But I didn't want to read it for the same reasons why I couldn't read Chase's other appearances.
I understand.
It sort of like becomes one of those things when you're so close to something. Not to dog those other creators. I mean, that's the important part. I don't want to dog those other creators. But when you're really close to something, it's hard to read someone else doing it without having a biased perspective.
Right, and it's a little bit heartbreaking too.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. Yeah. It's funny too because I've had opportunities here and there where they've called me for, to see if I would do a Batwoman cover or something that she's going to be on, and they want a cover focused on her, and they want my take on her for that cover, and I have to tell them no, because it's too much. I can't look at it without feeling too much emotion. So
I totally understand. That's so sad. That it really, really is. I know. I think I probably know the answer to this question, but a lot of what was done in the TV show was taken from your runs. Did you ever check that out? Did you ever look or watch the show to see their interpretation of your work?
I tried watching some of it, but it was hard. I couldn't get past it. Part of it, of course, my own personal bias issues. But I before that even came on, there was a lot of the DC TV stuff I had a hard time watching because I just didn't care for how it was done. Like the quality of it bothered me.
Yeah.
And so And I felt like, you know, Batwoman, the TV show, had more of the same kind of issues. One of the things that was peculiar is some of the changes that were made. I was surprised at, but this, and so when you see that sort of thing, you kind of have to divorce yourself. Like, well, that's the TV version.
Yeah.
The TV version is not the same. But it was funny because Hayden and I were talking. We're like, oh, they're using the murder of crows thing, and I had to tell him, like, no, I said, if you watch it, it's actually not our murder of crows. It's a security firm that's different enough from what our take is that it's not our creation. So don't sweat it.
Yeah, there was so, like, I only got through 2 episodes, and there was so much different. I loved Batwoman. I loved your run, like the allergy run. But going from that to the TV show, there is, I guess the nicest way to say it is such a drop in quality, and it feels almost like a in-name only character to me. I'm like, you know what? I'll just read back issues. I'm good. I'll just read back issues. That's what they're there for.
It's kind of, it's a bit disappointing in the fact that, particularly because they're dealing with a character like Chaykin, this hero who happens to be a lesbian that exists in the Batman universe. I just feel like I wish the show could have had more, I guess more care with it, maybe.
Yeah, a little more nuance.
Yeah, it's hard to quantify. I don't want to make the writers of that show.
I totally get it.
But I just kind of feel like it's a bit disappointing because it could have been a really huge thing, particularly for the gay community, to have a character like that on TV. And I almost feel like maybe it was treated or felt like, oh, this is just a given. This will be popular because of these details, rather than making sure those details really sing.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
It was actually, I didn't get the chance to really work on hardware much. I did like a pinup thing of hardware, but the thing I did over for Milestone before Deathwish was a little bit of Blood Syndicate instead.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah. I must have been mistaken.
Oh, that's okay. You probably had seen the hardware pinup thing that I did. That might have been in that Milestone Forever thing, or
that's probably exactly what it was. So
yeah.
Last question I'm going to bug you with today, because I am more DC than any other on my channel, especially. You've come back to DC doing a story for Batman Black and White.
Yeah.
Is there any more DC work coming your way in the future, or is it something you're going to focus on Echolands, or, focus on your own thing at this point?
At this point, mainly Echolands. DC's asked me to do a couple things here and there, like a cover here and there, that I just didn't have time for. One of the main reasons why I did the Batman Black and White was for the editor who was behind the project, Andy Curry.
Yeah,
I met him years ago. Always liked him. I think he's an interesting guy. Has a great editorial point of view. And so when he asked me to do it, I thought it was like, well, let me think about it. If I'm going to say yes, it's only because he's the one asking me.
Well, that's a shame. That's a shame. Not a shame in your part, but it's a shame that DC got rid of him and he's got that pull. I don't know. Yeah. I'm not going to say too much, but they're just a mess right now. I love it, but they're making some crazy decisions.
The only other thing I have on its way from DC is they're planning on putting out a Batwoman Omnibus. Yeah, which is going to be, I think, everything all the way up through, I can't remember. I can't remember if it has Elegy in it or not. I would hope so.
Yeah.
But I think it has everything all the way up to the conclusion of our run. So the whole thing is, I think all of it is in there up until they tried to kind of refresh the character. And then I don't know if they've even made this. I'm so out of the loop on new announcements from some of the publishers. I have no idea if they've even talked about this yet, but I guess they're planning some poster books.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn, but they're doing a poster book on some of my covers.
Oh, that's cool. I know they've done those in the past for other artists. That's awesome. I'm so glad they're doing one for you.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. And I was surprised that they would actually do one on my stuff, because it's not like I'm necessarily known for doing a bunch of covers over there.
Right.
So that was kind of a fun process, because, well, fun and difficult, because I had to go through and look at all the various covers I've done on series and try and narrow it down to 20 pieces.
Oh my gosh, that would be hard.
And but the result is pretty cool. I wanted to make sure I got some eclectic choices in there, that things that people might not even remember that I did. So, like, I got the American Vampire variant cover.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
I put that on there. A few things like that. So hopefully people end up digging that. But as far as new stories or interior work, probably not for a while.
Oh, well, that's okay. We'll follow you on Echolands. I love it. I can't wait to see more. So thanks. I want to absolutely thank you for your time. This is so humbling. I was so excited when you said yes. I really, really appreciate it. And make sure everybody, make sure you guys check out Echolands. I'll put the link to buy it on the pinned comment. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.